Your salary went up last year, maybe 5%, maybe 8%. Felt good. But if inflation was running at 7% and your salary went up 5%, you actually got poorer. You just didn't notice because the number on your paycheck went up. That's the trick. And governments have known about it for a very long time. Okay, let's start from the beginning, because most explanations of inflation either overcomplicate it or miss the point. Inflation simply means that prices rise over time. A coffee that cost $2 a decade ago might cost $5 today. That's inflation. But why does that happen? One of the simplest ways to think about it is this. There's more money competing for the same amount of goods. Imagine an economy with 10 apples and $10. If each apple costs $1, everything makes sense. Now imagine someone creates another $10, but there are still only 10 apples. Nothing about the apples has changed. There are no extra farms, no bigger harvest. The only difference is that there are now $20 chasing those same 10 apples. With more money in circulation and the same amount of goods, prices rise. Each apple now costs about $2. It's a simplified example, but that's the basic idea behind monetary inflation. Economist Milton Friedman summed it up in 1963 when he said, "Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon." His argument was straightforward. When governments and central banks expand the money supply faster than the economy produces goods and services, inflation follows. He also made another observation that's even more controversial. Inflation is taxation without legislation. Nobody votes for it. There's no headline saying your savings just lost purchasing power. But over time, your money quietly buys less than it used to. So if inflation slowly erodes the value of everyone's money, why would any government allow it? Or even encourage it? Here's the main reason: debt. The US government owes about $35 trillion. That's money it has borrowed over many decades to pay for things like wars, infrastructure, stimulus programs, healthcare, and countless other expenses. So what does inflation have to do with that? Quite a lot, actually. Imagine the government borrows $1 trillion today at a fixed interest rate and agrees to repay it in 10 years. Now, suppose inflation averages 5% a year over those 10 years. By the time the government pays that money back, a dollar won't buy what it does today. The amount they repay is still $1 trillion on paper, but each dollar has less purchasing power than when they borrowed it. So in real terms, the debt has become cheaper to repay. That's why economists often talk about the difference between nominal debt, the number written on paper, and real debt, which adjusts for inflation. This isn't some hidden conspiracy or an untested idea. It's basic economics, and governments around the world have benefited from it throughout history. After World War II, the US debt hit 106% of GDP in 1946, meaning the government owed more than the entire economy produced in a year. By 1974, that had fallen to 23% of GDP. How? Harvard economists Carmen Reinhart and Kenneth Rogoff, two of the most cited economists in the world, published research showing exactly what happened. Their NBR working paper, The Liquidation of Government Debt, found that the World War II debt overhang was importantly liquidated through the combination of financial repression and inflation. For the US and UK, the annual liquidation of debt via negative real interest rates amounted on average to 3 to 4% of GDP a year between 1945 and 1980. Consumer price inflation averaged 6.5% annually from 1946 to 1950, one according to seedy economists. That inflation literally ate a massive chunk of the war debt. The government paid it back in dollars worth far less than the ones they borrowed. CER research confirmed that the fall in the US debt to GDP ratio from 106% in 1946 to 23% in 1974 was mainly explained by budget surpluses, surprise inflation, and financial repression, not economic growth as is commonly assumed. More recently, Axios reported that in just the 14 months after Biden took office, America had inflated away $2.7 trillion of its national debt in real terms. The number on paper stayed the same, but what that number meant in purchasing power dropped dramatically. Penn-Wharton budget model calculated that permanently increasing the inflation target from 2% to 3% would reduce the real value of current federal debt by 7% by 2051. So when prices go up and you're angry about it, One quiet beneficiary is the government. Their debt just got cheaper. Thomas Sowell, economist at Stanford's Hoover Institution, put it this way: it is a way to take people's wealth from them without having to openly raise taxes. Inflation is the most universal tax of all. The second reason governments don't necessarily dislike inflation has nothing to do with debt. It has to do with taxes. One of the clearest examples is something economists call bracket creep. Suppose you earn $50,000 a year and pay 20% income tax. A year later, inflation is running at 5%, so your employer gives you a 5% raise. Your salary increases to $52,500. At first glance, that sounds like good news. But in reality, you haven't become any richer. Your raise simply keeps pace with higher prices, leaving your purchasing power almost unchanged. The problem is that tax systems don't always adjust as quickly as inflation. If tax brackets remain the same while your salary rises, part of your income can move into a higher tax bracket. Even though your standard of living hasn't improved, you may end up paying more tax. In other words, your income increased only to keep up with inflation, but your tax bill increased as well. The Tax Foundation describes this as a form of hidden taxation. As incomes rise with inflation, governments collect more revenue even when tax rates remain exactly the same. In the United States, this happened automatically for decades. Before federal tax brackets were indexed to inflation in 1985, millions of taxpayers gradually moved into higher brackets simply because prices and wages were rising. The same effect can still be seen in countries that don't fully index their tax systems. New Zealand provides a recent example. During the post-pandemic inflation surge, wages increased alongside prices, and government tax revenue rose from 97.4 billion New Zealand dollars in 2021 to 107.9 billion New Zealand dollars in 2022. Tax rates didn't need to change. Higher nominal incomes alone resulted in higher tax collections. From the government's perspective, revenue increases without announcing a tax hike. For taxpayers, the increase is much harder to notice. Most people assume the 2% inflation target is backed by decades of economic research. The reality is a little more surprising. The idea can be traced back to New Zealand in the late 1980s, where policymakers settled on a target of around 2%. Over time, that figure was adopted by many of the world's largest central banks, including the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank. The Federal Reserve didn't formally adopt its 2% target until 2012 under Chairman Ben Bernanke, who later remarked, "I don't see anything magical about targeting 2% inflation. So why not aim for 0? Because economists generally see deflation as a bigger risk. When prices keep falling, consumers often delay purchases, businesses invest less, and economic growth slows. Japan experienced this for much of the 1990s and 2000s, becoming a cautionary example for central banks around the world. A small amount of inflation encourages spending and investment while giving central banks room to respond when the economy weakens. It also has another effect we've already discussed. Over time, it reduces the real value of outstanding government debt. That's why most central banks target around 2%. The goal isn't to eliminate inflation, but to keep it low, stable, and predictable. There's a third benefit to governments from inflation that almost never gets discussed. It's called seigniorage, and the simple version is this. When the government prints new money, it captures real purchasing power because it creates something from nothing and uses it to buy real goods and services, military equipment, infrastructure, government salaries. But as more money enters circulation, each existing dollar is worth slightly less. The cost of that is spread silently across everyone who holds dollars. Milton Friedman addressed this directly in his 1971 paper Government Revenue from Inflation, published in the Journal of Political Economy. He argued governments can extract real resources from the economy simply by creating new money, without collecting a single visible tax. An IMF working paper by Nurun Chowdhury. Fiscal Revenue and Inflationary Finance examined this across multiple developing countries and found governments consistently use money creation as a source of revenue, with the costs borne by ordinary citizens through reduced purchasing power. In less developed economies, this becomes the primary way governments finance spending. In advanced economies like the US, it's more subtle, but the mechanism is the same. Inflation doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Whenever prices rise faster than incomes or investment returns, someone loses purchasing power while someone else benefits. In that sense, inflation isn't just about higher prices, it's also a redistribution of wealth. The people who tend to lose the most are those who keep a large share of their wealth in cash or fixed income savings. Imagine you have $100,000 sitting in a savings account earning 1% interest while inflation is running at 5%. Your bank balance is still growing, but not fast enough to keep up with rising prices. In real terms, your purchasing power is shrinking by roughly 4% each year. The same problem affects many retirees, pensioners, and households living on fixed incomes. Unless their income rises at the same pace as inflation, every year they can afford a little less than the year before. Borrowers are in a very different position. If you took out a fixed-rate mortgage or another long-term loan before inflation increased, you're repaying that debt with dollars that buy less than they did when you borrowed them. The amount you owe hasn't changed, but the purchasing power of the money used to repay it has. Owners of real assets often benefit as well. Property, shares, and other investments frequently rise in value over long periods of inflation, although not always by the same amount or at the same time. The largest borrower in the United States is the federal government. That means inflation also reduces the real value of a significant portion of its outstanding debt. Research published by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis examined this effect and concluded that unexpected inflation transfers wealth from lenders to borrowers by reducing the real value of fixed-rate debt. Because governments are among the world's largest borrowers, they are part of that transfer alongside households and businesses with fixed-rate loans. None of this means inflation is designed to help one group or punish another, but it does mean its effects are uneven. People who rely on cash savings and fixed incomes usually bear a larger share of the cost. Borrowers and owners of appreciating assets often find that inflation works more in their favor. Understanding inflation isn't just about knowing why prices rise. It's about understanding who ultimately pays for those higher prices and who doesn't. Governments may tolerate moderate inflation, but runaway inflation is a different story. Once it spirals out of control, the economic damage can be severe. Zimbabwe is one of the clearest examples. In 2008, hyperinflation reached an estimated 89.7 sextillion%. Prices changed so quickly that the currency became practically worthless, forcing the country to abandon it altogether. Germany experienced something similar during the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s. Hyperinflation wiped out savings, destroyed confidence in the currency, and left millions struggling to afford basic goods. Even much lower inflation creates problems. In the United States, inflation reached 9.1% in June 2022, the highest level in 4 decades. Economists continue to debate the exact causes, but pandemic stimulus, supply chain disruptions, and higher energy prices all played important roles. To bring inflation back down, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates aggressively. Borrowing became more expensive, mortgage payments increased, and households felt the impact in almost every part of their budgets. The lesson is straightforward. Moderate inflation may help governments manage debt, but once inflation becomes too high, the costs spread across the entire economy. So, do governments want inflation? Not runaway inflation, but moderate inflation can work in their favor. It reduces the real value of government debt, increases tax revenue without changing tax rates, and allows new money to finance spending through seigniorage. Inflation isn't just a rise in prices. It's a policy tool with winners and losers. Understanding how it works is the first step to understanding how the modern economy really works. See you next time.